But the FBI spent 15 years running a program designed not to catch criminals, designed to destroy them, not through prosecution, not through evidence, through manipulation, misinformation, and deliberate psychological damage aimed at organizations and individuals that the director of the FBI had decided were dangerous to the country, without a law being broken, without a trial, without the people being targeted ever knowing it was happening. That is not a theory. That is the confirmed finding of a United States Senate investigation. Here's what they didn't tell you about COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, was officially initiated by the FBI in 1956 under Director J. Edgar Hoover. It was originally directed at the Communist Party, USA, but its targets expanded rapidly over the following decade to include the Socialist Workers' Party, the Ku Klux Klan, the American Indian Movement, the Puerto Rican Independence Movement, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Nation of Islam, and the Black Panther Party, among others. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of its primary targets. Pause for a second. The FBI ran the program until 1971, 15 years in total. It was never approved by Congress. It was never submitted to judicial review. It was authorized internally, operated internally, and remained classified until it was not. And the reason it became public had nothing to do with official transparency. On March 8, 1971, a group of activists broke into an FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania. They removed every document they could carry and sent copies to newspapers. Among the documents was a memo referencing a program most Americans had never heard of. The Washington Post published the documents, and the name COINTELPRO entered the public record for the first time. But what that name represented was something the documents only partially revealed. If a program is designed not just to observe but to interfere, where is the line? Because the FBI's own documents showed that the line had already been erased long before anyone knew the program existed. The methods used under COINTELPRO went far beyond surveillance. Agents infiltrated organizations, sometimes rising to positions of leadership within them. False documents were created and distributed to create the impression of internal betrayal. Forged letters were sent in the names of real people to damage relationships and trigger internal conflict. Anonymous tips were sent to employers, landlords, and family members to damage individuals financially and personally. Allegations, sometimes fabricated, were passed to the press. In one documented case, the FBI sent an anonymous letter to the wife of a Black Panther leader, falsely claiming her husband was having an affair with another woman in the party. The stated goal in the internal memo was to cause marital discord. That memo exists, it is in the public record, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. The targeting of Martin Luther King Jr. is the most extensively documented example of what the program was capable of. The FBI had surveilled King since the late 1950s. By 1963, the surveillance had escalated to full wiretapping of his home and office phones, authorized by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, based on FBI claims that a King advisor had communist ties. Hoover believed that King represented the most dangerous Negro in America, a phrase that appears in the FBI's own files. In 1964, the FBI sent King a package. It contained an audio recording compiled from surveillance of King in hotel rooms across the country. It also contained an anonymous letter. The letter told King that his private behavior had been documented, that it would be released to the public, and that he had 34 days to act. The implication was unmistakable. Researchers and King's family have long characterized it as a suggestion that he should take his own life before the material became public. King received that letter 34 days before he was scheduled to accept the Nobel Peace Prize. Now think about that. A letter from the United States government sent anonymously by an FBI operative under the authorization of a program that did not officially exist, telling one of the most prominent civil rights leaders in American history what the FBI believed his options were. That letter's in the National Archives. If information can be shaped from the inside, how do you know what you are seeing is real? Because that is the precise mechanism that COINTELPRO was designed to exploit. When an organization's internal communications are being monitored, when its members include informants reporting to federal agents, when anonymous information designed to look like internal dissent is being introduced into its decision-making, the organization is no longer operating on the basis of what is actually true. It is operating on the basis of a reality that has been partially constructed by an external actor with an undisclosed agenda. And this is the part most people don't expect. That mechanism was not limited to radical organizations. It was applied broadly. The Church Committee's investigation, completed in 1976, found that the FBI had opened files on more than 1 million Americans under various programs related to political activity. It found that the program had targeted not only organizations the FBI believed to be subversive, but also individuals who had done nothing more than publicly disagree with government policy. The Church Committee report stated directly that the FBI had violated the constitutional rights of American citizens. It described COINTELPRO as a sophisticated vigilante operation. Those are the words of a United States Senate committee. Now fast forward, the program officially ended in 1971 following the media break-in and the public pressure that resulted. Director Hoover sent a memo officially terminating COINTELPRO activities in April of that year, but the Church Committee's investigation 5 years later found evidence suggesting that some activities consistent with COINTELPRO methods had continued under different designations after the official termination. The program ended. The methods, the investigation suggested, did not necessarily end with it. If it only stopped because it was exposed, what allows something like that to continue in the first place? The answer the record provides is structural. COINTELPRO operated for 15 years because it existed in a space between the legal frameworks designed to constrain government power. It was never subject to judicial authorization. It was never subject to congressional oversight. It was classified, self-authorizing, and internally accountable. The people running it reported to Hoover. Hoover reported to no one who was asking. That structure did not create COINTELPRO, but it allowed COINTELPRO to exist, expand, and continue without interruption for 15 years. And here's the reframe. COINTELPRO is often discussed as a surveillance program, a domestic spying operation that went too far, and in the narrowest technical sense, surveillance was part of it. But the documented record describes something more specific and more significant than surveillance. It describes a program in which the FBI moved from observation to active shaping of reality, in which agents did not just watch organizations but entered them, influenced them, and in some cases effectively controlled the information environment they operated in which the tools of perception, trust, and internal communication were treated as variables to be managed. The distinction between watching and influencing is not a small one. Watching is passive, influencing changes outcomes, and the documented methods of COINTELPRO were explicitly designed to produce specific outcomes: the dissolution of organizations, the discrediting of individuals, the suppression of movements, without those targets ever knowing that the outcomes had been engineered. We have seen this pattern across this channel: in Watergate, where official communication was used to manage a narrative; in the Pentagon Papers, where private assessments existed alongside carefully managed public ones; in the Gulf of Tonkin, where uncertainty was converted into authorization; in MK Ultra, where subjects operated in an environment that had been altered without their knowledge. COINTELPRO is that same pattern applied to domestic political life, not to enemies abroad, to American citizens on American soil by their own government, because at that point it stops being about security and starts being about control. So here's the question worth sitting with. COINTELPRO ran for 15 years without the people it targeted knowing it existed. It ended because a group of activists broke into an office and took the files, not because an oversight mechanism identified it, not because a law was triggered, because someone took the documents and put them in the mail. If that had not happened, the program would have continued. So here's what that leaves you with. If the line between watching and influencing a population can be erased by a classified program that no external authority is monitoring, what is the mechanism that prevents it from happening again? And if the answer to that question depends on someone finding the files, what does that tell you about what you don't know right now? Tell me in the comments what you think, because that question is not just about 1971.